Hi everyone and welcome to Caravel Gaming. This is Boomer and today we will be going into a couple of constructed games in Hex. I played these games against Maddy recently. Unfortunately our schedules have sort of crossed over, so we've not been able to do this video together. However, we do have the hands revealed and it is a matchup of two of the current strongest decks in the Hex environment. First of all, let's look at this one. It's the Mono Sapphire control deck. I'll just order it by type so we can see what's going on here. 26 Sapphire Shards in the deck because this deck is really mana hungry and it wants to make a shard every single turn. It's got 7 drops and a lot of 5 drops in it, so it really wants to make mana. 4 Ancestors Chosen. This guy is a backbone of the deck and he is a pain in the backside. He is a 1-1 for 1, so he comes down underneath any potential way to remove him, and at the start of your turn you create 2 Ancestral Spectres and shuffle them into your deck. Ancestral Spectres are 2/2s with flight for 1, and when they come into play draw a card. So Ancestral Spectres are obviously massively overpowered, but it fits in with the entire synergy of the deck. You just draw through a load of cards. The deck does a huge amount of bouncing, a huge amount of sort of controlling your opponent's resources, and you can pull off some really wacky combos with that, as well as them just being super efficient. 4 Buccaneers, because Buccaneer's really good. 3 mana for a 2/2. When it comes into play, bounce a creature to its controller's hands, and it gets permanent cost +1, which is really good. 4 Eldritch Dreamer with the Prime Sapphire, I believe, of Mind. It's a 3/3 for 4. It cannot be blocked, and when it hits your opponent, draw a card. When it deals damage to your opponent, draw a card. So, yep. Basically, if you're playing this deck, you make this, it survives, and you hit your opponent with it, it's very rare you will end up losing. And then we get on to how the deck usually wins. 4 Menacing Grolks. When it comes into play, exhaust each opposing troop. These troops can't ready during their controller's next ready step. 2/2 with flight, and this is the deck's main way of sort of holding your opponent down. Obviously this deck can't play Extinction. This is a really good way to do it. At the beefy end we have 2 Storm Colossus, 7 mana for a 6/6 with flight and spell shield, and it's pretty much unremovable by anything except Extinction in the format, and really your opponent will be wanting to use Extinction a little bit earlier, or you play it when you have the ability to protect it, because with Spell Shield you can target this guy, your opponent cannot, so you can always bounce it with another couple of spells in the deck. 4 Mastery of Time. Take an additional turn after this one for 5. Now you can see these 2 5-drops, Menacing Grolk, Mastery of Time. Almost very much like the Gore-Feast decks. You can see you can actually establish a presence on the board, and then you just lock your opponent out of the game and just hit them with several small guys, or unblockable guys in this case. And as for search, we've got 3 Peak, which is look at the top X cards of your deck, where X is the number of Sapphire threshold you have. Put 1 into your hand and shuffle the rest into your deck. Some builds run 4, some run 3. It's really up to you. 3 time ripples, bounce a card to its controller's hand, it gets permanent cost +1. So this, along with Buccaneer, are what give you sort of game in the early game, keep you in it in the early game. Throws your opponent off tempo, just makes the game a lot harder for your opponent. 2 Yesterdays, which is put each troop into its controller's hand. So this is an emergency reset button, and also with the Ancestral Spectres from this guy, Buccaneers from this, Grolks from this, it's just another way that you just establish basically a lock on your opponent. And the one card which makes the deck tough to play against is Counter Magic, which is 3 interrupt target card. Each card with the same name as that card owned by an opposing champion in all zones gets permanent cost +2. So it makes a really big sort of deal about casting a spell into open mana from your opponent. If you do that, you can potentially get it counter magicked. The problem is, with Counter Magic, I think that Counter Magic's one of the most skill testing cards in the format, because if you just run into it, you get whatever you deserve. However, it's very easy in this deck to use it at the wrong time, and so you might see something of this in the game. You know, you can have Like, say you have a 2-drop on the board. Your opponent passes on turn 3 without doing anything. Don't just run a spell into your opponent. There's no need to do so. You're already ahead on board. Make your opponent react to you. You don't have to always... And this is something that a lot of people who aren't familiar with games where you can react to your opponent, you don't have to play something during your turn. And... you know, if you're already ahead on board, you don't need to commit more to the board often. Sometimes you do to put your opponent on a faster clock. Other times, you don't need to. And you can also do things like bleed out counter magic with a test spell, or what's known as a test spell, which basically means you cast a spell that you make your opponent think you want to resolve, to make them use their counter magic, and then you use the spell you really want to resolve. For example, against this deck, I would really want to resolve cards like Living Totem. I would really want to resolve cards like Vampire King. I would also really want to, if I was behind, I'd really want to resolve Extinction. So I'd find ways to try and play through or around counter magic, and that's one of the skill testers of any card game with these sort of effects in, is your ability to play around them. Okay, and that deck will be going up against the it'll be going up against the big sort of demon of the format, which is, I've labelled it Huge Blood Diamond, but it's basically Blood Diamond control with a really big top end in order to sort of beat other Blood Diamond decks, because once you end up in a Blood Diamond versus Blood Diamond mirror, it generally goes on who gets Soul Marble, who has like the biggest top end. Now, I don't have all the cards to quite build this version of the deck that I'm showing off here, because this version of the deck was one that went 4-0 twice in VIP tournaments, so I think if you're looking for a build of Blood Diamond, this is probably the build you want to go for. The differences are, I think my build has 1 less Vampire King, and it has 1 less Uranars, and it has 2 Eternal Guardians. So... but the one reason that I decided to go with Eternal Guardian was basically because Soul Marble Eternal Guardian is pretty much a lock on several decks. So I felt like it was probably worth putting this in just for the random sort of cheese win. But we'll walk through the cards, and you can. This is the deck that gets people annoyed the most regarding the game, mainly because this is the most expensive deck in the game, bar none. You can see all these oranges here, which means legendary. You know, this is basically stuff a load of legendaries into your deck. If you wanted to buy this deck from scratch using just platinum, it would probably be about $130 to throw together. So you know, it's one of the decks which makes people go, oh, pay, you know, yell pay to win and everything like that, without realizing that pretty much all games are paid to, you know, most games which have either a free-to-play aspect or are card games are pay to win at some level, because if they weren't pay to win, then there would be no point in the publisher making the game, because they simply wouldn't be able to make money off it if it was too easy to go infinite in inverted commas. You know, in order for a game to make money, you can't have 50% of your player base going infinite on the game. You just won't end up making enough money. Okay, so, or probably more than 50%, you know, if you have like 70-80% of your player base just paying nothing for the game, it's like, what's the point in making it, because you're not going to make enough money. Okay, 26 shards again, because we are a pure control deck and we have a huge top end. So I mean, this is a deck where you could legitimately play 27, and I wouldn't actually blame you. 2 Eternal Guardians, as I said, this is my sort of touch to the deck. Eternal Guardian is actually quite hard to deal with. It can make a really big mess if your opponent's unable to damage you. And especially if you're playing against something like a burn deck and you play, they then have to divert their attention to the Eternal Guardian rather than to you. So with you having just more powerful cards, it buys you that little bit of time. 4 Xanthos Inquisitor. with the Primordial Brutality because blah, this is basically the king of all mid-range and control creatures. When it comes into play, it gives the creature permanent -3, -0, or whatever its power is, basically whatever its power is -0. And when it dies, it comes back into your hand and gains permanent cost +2. So this is the card that shuts down like all mid-range strategies, pretty much all mid-range strategies, because most of them rely on either Eldritch Dreamer or Vampire King, both of which have 3 power, and both of which this just shuts down completely. So Inquisitor is sort of the king of all 4-drops currently. Will that change with set 2? Probably not. There's been a lot of noise made about the Killipede from set 2. Inquisitor shuts Killipede down just as well as it shuts anything else down. So I just think that Inquisitor is going to be the big daddy for as long as it's legal, basically. Vampire King, 3/4 life drain flight for 4. When it deals damage to an opposing champion, reveal a random card. If it's a troop, transform it into a vampire, which I'm unable to click on at the moment. It's a 2/2. It's basically a 2/2 hottie with flying and life drain. I think Vampire King is at its best in Sapphire Blood rather than Diamond Blood, because Sapphire obviously has all the bounce spells, so you can just go ahead and like bounce your opponent's creature back to his hand, beat him up, take it with Vampire King, make a 2/2 from it. It's also that's also like really good at killing your opponent's Inquisitors and things like that permanently. You just bounce it back to the hand and nick it with Vampire King. So I think that if you're playing Sapphire Blood, you probably want to play 4 Vampire Kings. But if you're playing any other colour, Vampire King is just a quote-unquote good dude. So, but there are plenty of good dudes certainly at 4, and I think that Inquisitor is just better. In 2-drop spot, we've got Living Totem, which is a 2/2 for 2 with a billion abilities that all cost 3. You can give it +1/+1, Swift Strike, Flight, Life Drain, and Steadfast. This guy gives Mono Sapphire utter fits because it's just so cheap, comes down under counter magic. You just keep casting it, casting it, casting it. It's bigger than all their guys usually, and it means you don't have to cast spells again. You can dump all your excess mana into it. 4 Angel of Dawn, most expensive card in the game currently for a pretty good reason. It's not as powerful as it could be in this game, mainly because at the moment there's almost no way to draw cards at instant speed, meaning you can't do the whole play it on your opponent's turn. And there's very few ways to actually, there's in fact no ways currently to manipulate the top of your library. So therefore this card isn't as powerful as it would be, say, if you worded it slightly differently. If there was a card like this in Magic the Gathering, this card would be utterly destructive because of cards like Sensei's Divining Top, etc. Whereas in Hex it's that little bit less power. It's still powerful, but it's that little bit less powerful because you can't sort of guarantee it being in play. Final creature is Uranaz, the Black Dragon, 5/5, unique with flying. When it enters play or deals damage to an opposing champion, steal a troop from their graveyard and put it into play under your control. It's just a really powerful effect. And certainly after sideboarding, when you go into the reserves, you bring in discard against a lot of decks, and obviously that makes Uranaz sort of super effective against those sort of decks. Also, because you're running the whole sort of removal package, you can kill a guy and dig it up again. So, you know, Uranaz makes things really quite easy for you. And we get onto the spell package, or the constant package that we have here. We have 4 Soul Marbles. This card is ridiculous. 2 mana constant, add a sculpture counter to it for 1 at any time. If there are 10 or more, choose 1, transform it into Soul Cavalry, which is a 6/6 with Steadfast and Spell Shield. This is what you usually do first up against Mono Sapphire, or at least this is what I choose to do against Mono Sapphire, because a lot of their removal sort of targeted. You know, the Time Ripple and Buccaneer, and you just turn it into a 6/6 with Spell Shield and just go, bring it, bro. And that way you don't kind of get blown out. Because if you turn it into Soul Armaments, which gives all your troops +2/+2 Steadfast and Spell Shield, If you do that, your opponent can time ripple your soul armaments and just blow you out in combat, which makes things a little bit awkward. So I tend to, it usually depends on board state what you're going to do, but a lot of the time, more often than not, you're going to transform it into soul armaments, but occasionally transforming it into soul cavalry is fine. And that's absolutely fine. For Solitary Exile, this deck actually isn't playing Murder. My guess is because it's not as efficient at doing what it does as the other two cards. Exile is when it comes into play, void another card. When it leaves play, put it back into play under its control. This is probably a concession to the 2-pack decks or the other Soul Marble decks. It's just maximum number of ways to deal with an opposing Soul Marble or an opposing Pact of Pain or something like that. So 4 Solitary Exile seems quite good under that. I am a little bit worried against Mono Sapphire with it because obviously Time Ripple, he gets back his thing, awkward. And the maximum top end, Resurrection, 9 mana, 3 of which is Diamond. At the end of your turn, put target troop from your graveyard into play and it gets permanent +2/+2, which, you know, this effect's ridiculous, and it works very well with obviously Extinction. It just lets you win the grind war, basically. It's something I've tried to do with Lorgoyle in the past as well, just win the grind war. Because unless something very odd happens, Blood Diamond Mirrors basically turn into a massive grind. And that is why this is why this deck's set up the way it is, basically, because it gives you the best chance to win the grind. And 4 Repels, which is just destroy target attacking troop, which probably one of the most efficient spells there is in the game. Now, instead of Zared, which is usual for this deck, Dimid is the champion for this version of the deck, and again, you win the grind because of Dimid, because you make an angel, you beat them for 4, you gain 4 life, that's an 8-point life swing, and it just keeps going and going and going. And obviously with a Soul Marble in play, you gain more life, and that's another thing you can do. You make this Soul Cavalry, you give it lifelink, you spank your opponent with it, you gain 6 life. It's a deck really designed to grind your opponent out. Now, obviously, you can just straight up win. You can just hit a turn 2 angel, make a living totem, your opponent's got 1 mana and goes, oh, I guess I lose then. And that's what this deck can do, but usually it's set up to be a massive grind. But anyway, that's it for the 2 decks, and we'll now go on to the games. Okie dokie. Now, unfortunately, I was a bit of an idiot and I didn't record my side of game 1, but we'll be able to see this from Maddy's perspective. So let's have a look at this opener. Looks okay. There's lands and spells there, but there is no, there's no sort of way of dealing with anything where we're under pressure. So I think the hand's okay. The one thing that the Mono Sapphire deck's really good at, because it's mono-coloured, is that it mulligans really well. Whereas I've taken a mulligan to 6 first up. So at this point, if I were Maddy, I would be assuming that I was on either Blood Diamond or Blood Sapphire. Or Diamond Sapphire. Diamond Sapphire's probably a little bit more likely. But not too sure at this point. Still not revealing anything, and Living Totem can still mean that it could still mean that I'm either Diamond Sapphire or Blood Diamond. So this is one of the cards that Maddy really didn't want me to see because he's got no real way of dealing with that totem. So it's a bit awkward. Oh, speaking of a bit awkward, yeah, that's quite nasty. Now, at this point on my side, I'm just thinking, yeah, there's going to be a time ripple in my future here. Because the Mono Sapphire is pretty well set up to deal with Angel of Dawn, but at this point, nope, apparently not. Okay, and a Shard of Fate. And this will reveal what my second colour is, and it's blood. So, at this point, I could be mana screwed. Sure, like me as in Boomer could be mana screwed at this point. If that's my last shard, then that could be a bad news. It could also be that I just wanted to make the totem turn 2 and I have something to play on turn 4, therefore I am just making the Shard of Fate now. Timing your Shard of Fate drops is actually really, it's really quite a strange, or it's a sort of really interesting thing to sort of time. I decided not to use Dimmy here. I think I possibly could, but Maddy's not done anything yet, so I'm still waiting for that time ripple, and when it doesn't come here, I'm pretty certain that it's not in Maddy's hand. I choose not to play anything in my hand at this point because Maddy's holding up counter magic, so it's more likely it's going to come down. Maddy's got a couple of choices here. He can hold up time ripple or he can make a dreamer. I think the dreamer's the more, I would actually call it the higher variance play, and the reason for that is that I think that if he time ripples the Angel of Dawn, that shuts it down for 2 turns and you can always counter magic it on the way down. The dreamer, now that he knows he's up against Blood Diamond, it's very likely the dreamer's going to die. I give my Living Totem flying, and I'm also going to... yeah, there you go. There's the Inquisitor, so that shuts down this Eldritch Dreamer, and it also puts another threat on the board for me. So again, Maddy's not really had an opportunity at this point to use his counter magics well. Because I decided not to run anything out. Now obviously running the Inquisitor out there wouldn't have been very good last turn anyway, because it's just a 4 mana 3/1 if nothing's in play, and Maddy certainly has things that I would like to stop with it. Okay, Maddy grolks me, which for me is absolutely fine because there's no Maddy's not going to gain any tempo advantage from this because he's got no power on the board, so there's no real worries on my behalf. And once again, Maddy's tapped out, so those 2 counter spells aren't doing much good for him, and I just cast another Angel of Dawn. So really at this point, yesterday is the only thing that's going to stop me from killing Maddy at this point, or something ridiculous like, multiple chaining Grolks. So, options here, I think that Maddy just has to hold up both time ripples. In fact, if he casts a Dreamer and holds up 1 time ripple, he still has to trade the Dreamer for... He has to trade the Dreamer for my Inquisitor, so that's not very good now. So yeah, he has to hold up double time ripple. I've missed at least 1 or 2 activations of Dimmy at this point. I should have definitely used it on the Angel of Dawn at least once. One of the main reasons I've not done it is I don't really want to get blown out on my hero ability. Okay, so here comes everything. Double time ripple plus block the Inquisitor seems to be the mode of the day here, and we end up with a double forget here because Maddy forgets to block, and I just assumed that he'd block, so went straight forward. Obviously, if Maddy hadn't, if I was concentrating at that point, I would have actually just made the Living Totem. But again, Maddy's not got counter magic up, so we apply a bit more pressure with Vampire King, and yeah, Maddy's just not had that opportunity to make good on those counter magics in his hand. And he's on 1, and there's no way back in. So that's 1-0 to me, and we actually should have both hands up at this point. There we go. So Maddy's mulligan to 6 in this game, and it's actually not looking good for him. Oh, that's actually looking a lot better for him. Makes Ancestors Chosen. I've not got a lot of action going on in my hand, that's for sure, but I do have access to all my mana and Extinction and a Soul Marble, so I decide to keep. And while I'm free to do so, let's make that Soul Marble. Now Maddy does have Time Ripple in his hand, so it is possible he can at least hold the Soul Marble off for a while. I could have held up Repel there, but I wanted to put Soul Marble down, and the 1 damage isn't really a big deal. I would rather have the Repel for his Dreamer or something similar. What Maddy wants to do really in this matchup is get to the point where he has just a shed load of Ancestral Spectres in his deck. Now I've got a couple of options with what to play here. I decided to go with the Shard of Fate, and the reason for that is that I might potentially want an Extinction up on turn 4. Especially if Maddy makes a Dreamer or something like that. This time around I want to be able to kill it immediately. Maddy draws a second Dreamer here, so I think he's just going to go straight ahead and cast it. If he didn't draw another Dreamer, it's actually really interesting what he should do, because the Dreamer's a super high value card. So I'm not really sure you want to throw it out there when it's pretty obvious what I'm representing as Extinction at this point, especially by making the second blood. I'm just going to pump my Soul Marble up. And with Maddy tapped out, it's a fairly simple Extinction here. I don't want that. I don't want that Dreamer doing anything. Just a standard 2-for-1. You're very rarely going to get anything more than a 2-for-1 with Extinction against either a good player or someone who's sort of not playing the sort of massive rush deck. Okay, so Maddy gets to counter it with Wyatt. And he's got a handful of sort of Grolkish action going on here. So Eldritch Dreamer comes down. I do have a Repel for that, so I can at least hold it off in the meantime. Really, this whole game is going to swing, especially with me drawing like I am at the moment. Really, this whole game is going to swing on whether this Repel resolves or not. Reason for that mainly being that, you know, I can't let Maddy have an active Eldritch Dreamer on the board. So I need to draw something like an Inquisitor or a Murder or something like that, because, you know, an active Dreamer is just something I can't beat. So this is me crossing my fingers, because it's just about all I can do at this point. And Maddy makes the correct play, which is to time ripple his own Dreamer. He can't play it this turn, but it does save it from the Repel, so that is okay. Maddy's thinking about making a blind bucket, you know, just a, yep. Maddy goes ahead and just makes a 2-2 Buccaneer here. I'm not convinced that's right. He doesn't really get any sort of tempo advantage out of it. But I guess he's thinking, with me putting Soul Marble on the table, that he's not really going to have an opportunity to do anything good with that Buccaneer, so just making it seems fine. Exile's a brilliant draw, because obviously that means I can now kill his, I can now deal with his Dreamer. And I make another diamond, another blood, just so that I can, cast Uranar's next turn if I have the ability to do so. If Maddy opens the window for it. And what I'm contemplating now is turning the Soul Marble into a Soul Armor, sorry, not a Soul Cavalry. Because Maddy's tapped down, you know, he's made the Buccaneer, so he's only got 1 mana open. He doesn't actually have a way to blow me out of spending all my mana on Soul Marble. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to put it onto 10 counters, and I'm going to make these 6/6. And that's going to be extremely difficult for Maddy to deal with, because I also have 2 lifelink charges. There we go, make the 6/6, put lifelink on it, and this is extremely irritating for Mono Sapphire, mainly because its win condition generally is very good at doing sort of 20 to 25 damage, because it essentially just takes like 3 or 4 turns in a row. But once you start getting into like that 35-40 life vein, it can just overstretch itself, and it might not be right. So Maddy makes Eldritch Dreamer. Not convinced about that. I actually think I may have made Grolk there. You know, the top of my library is not being particularly kind to me at the moment, but I guess Maddy's hoping that that Dreamer survives and then he can do the Grolk Mastery of Time stuff. So basically I am recognising the threat that that Dreamer shows, make Solitary Exile, and dimmed my cavalry up again and hit Maddy for another 6. So that puts me up to 30, which makes me feel pretty safe no matter what's in Maddy's hand at this point. I mean, Maddy does have the quote-unquote perfect 3. You know, he can go Grolk Mastery of Time, which is, you know, that's pretty awesome, really. And so Maddy gets in for a free 2 here. And Grolk's about the only way he can hold my Soul Cavalry down. He's going to hold it for a couple of turns here. Makes Ancestors Chosen, that's fine. So my plan now is just to draw yet more diamond shards and make Uranars, which is also bigger than anything that Maddy's got on the board. And I'll pick. I actually at that point I got a little bit ahead of myself there. I probably, because yes, Eldritch Dreamer's unblockable, but I don't draw a card. No, it's probably right. It is actually, it's probably right to use Dreamer there, because even though I don't draw a card, it's a 3/3 unblockable, and Maddy is only on 8 life, so that's only 3 swings. But there we go. Maddy has another Grolk, so that's 5 damage this turn, and my guys don't untap again. And this is sort of what the, you know, this is what the Mono Sapphire deck does. But fortunately I've been able to pin back his card advantage engine here, so it's unlikely he's going to be able to kill me from this point. I'm just going to keep making shards just so I've got dimmy charges, because at the end of the day, one way or the other, that Uranars and that Soul Cavalry are going to, you know, they are going to seriously cause a they're going to seriously take out like half of Maddy's creatures. But there you go, a menacing Grolk and an Ancestor's Chosen and a Time Warp. So, you know, there you go, another 7. And if I hadn't have gained that 12 life from the Soul Cavalry at this point, Maddy would now be attacking for lethal. And in fact, with that is a hell of a top deck. It's like, in fact, without lethal, it's still, you know, even without lethal, it's still a pretty brutal board position. Now, Maddy's got to think a little bit here, because he can't attack with everything, because then I just attack back and kill him. So, like, attacking with everything would be bad. I think his best play is probably something like that, because this gets him max damage, puts me on 10, and I have to now think pretty heavily about what I'm doing here. As you know, at the end of the day, my draw here has been pretty poor. It's only the fact that I've got the 1 soul marble that things have gone quite nicely. Now I've got to think. I'm wondering about whether to offer him the free Uran. Well, I obviously do. Yeah. Okay, that seems fine. Lifelink up the Soul Cavalry and then offer the free Uranars. But if he does take the free Uranars, that means he's down to 5. Or do I? No. Right, I'm offering to just trade with the Storm Colossus here, if he wants. Uranars, I suppose, is fine as he is, because he's just hanging back and it stops anything attacking except for the Storm Colossus. And obviously, with me gaining 6 life a turn, I really don't need to. I don't need to be too upset with the possibility of him attacking with just a Storm Colossus. Maddy's other option last turn was just to hang back with everything, and that would probably preclude me attacking at all. But then again, that's not really an option, because I have Eldritch Dreamer. Yeah, because then I lifelink up the Dreamer, hit him for 3 with it. I go to 13, he goes to 5, and then he's in a very similar situation. It's just a case where he's potentially... hard one. I decided to make the Inquisitor here because I want to shut down one of his flyers, so he can't easily trade with my guys, and you know, this puts me back in a really good position here. So okay, Maddy doesn't get much, and I think he's just going to have to skip here. He's just got a bluff that he has counter magic, but I don't think that really helps him because it's not like I'm going to not play around it. You know, I don't really have an option at this point. I just have to go, okay, the odds are that you're probably bluffing with that. So if I attack with Uranars as well here, I can take his Storm Colossus out of the fight. I still think that attacking with Uranars here is probably a little bit of a mistake. Got to think a little bit about this attack. If I attack with I can attack with the Inquisitor quite freely because it'll always come back. I think attacking with Uranars is a mistake there because I'm just offering it up to the Storm Colossus and he'll just end up chumping the Soul Cavalry anyway. So I think I should just hang back with Uranars there because it's never getting through. All I'm doing is like dwindling down his creatures, I suppose. It's like it kills another of his guys. But I don't really think that it's a major... I don't really think it's a major thing, to tell you the truth. And yeah, he takes the free Uranars that I'm offering, which, you know, I think that's a mistake to attack the way I did there. And yeah, just throw the Vampire King out there, and if he doesn't have counter magic, this is a you know, this is an oh boy situation. So Ancestral Spectre. Oh, what a peel! What a peel! That is incredible. It puts the he's going to put the Eldritch Dreamer back into my hand, and of course because it's double Sapphire I can't cast it, so now I've got to find another way to win. This is awkward. With Maddy on 2 as well. Now I suppose I do have Resurrection. So that's one card I have. Well, that's not too bad either. I'm not sure it's bad enough. I'm not sure the situation is bad enough at the moment for me to want to Extinction. This is rough. Yeah, just attack with everything just because I've got Extinction in hand, and we'll just see what the result is. If he decides to block with his Storm Colossus, I'm going to hold the Extinction. If he doesn't decide to block with the Storm Colossus, I might just leave things as is. We'll see what I mean. Maddy has to block everything here, so let's see how he decides to block. Yeah, he goes for the block everything line, which will leave just the Storm Colossus in play, which is obviously the correct, you know, that's pretty much correct based on what he knows. But I'm now going to Extinction, killing the Storm Colossus, and make the Zentos Inquisitor. So I now have a guy on an empty board, so it's now up to Maddy to come up with the goods again, which he probably can, because unless he top decks counter magic, he will have something to play. Yep, and this is where Ancestral Spectre comes into its own. Ancestral Spectre into Storm Colossus. It's like, please make the top of your deck better. But again, the Inquisitor is just going to keep coming back and back, so Maddy can't actually attack with that Storm Colossus. So I'm just going to keep making some shards just in case. I could hold them, but there's not really anything that I want to bluff. Shard of Fate is definitely something that you can just hold at this point in the game. Maddy wants to keep making shards. The reason for that being that he is he's going towards his hero ability of drawing more cards. That is a ballsy attack from Maddy there. Because like, if I have any removal spell, if like the second card in my hand is a removal spell, he is dead. But unfortunately, for me anyway, it isn't. However, the Extinction is a hell of a top deck. It doesn't really matter if I attack or not here, but I am going to attack just in case Maddy's an idiot and decides not to block. But funnily enough, Maddy isn't a complete idiot, so decides to block. I get my dude back and I blow up his Storm Colossus. So that's both of Maddy's Storm Colossuses gone now. He's used 2 Grolks as well, 2 Dreamers. So really, it's however many Ancestral Spectres he can pull at this. 3 Dreamers. But it's however many Ancestral Spectres he can pull at this point that really matters, because the Xentos Inquisitor at this point is now going to shut off his... oh, that's a nice peel. But I'm going to use the Inquisitor to shut off his Dreamer, just in case he comes up with any sort of nasty time ripple action in order to get his Dreamer back and draw a card. I'm really paranoid about letting this mono Sapphire deck draw cards. And he's making a good show of it with these Ancestral Spectres. And he gets to draw another card because of his hero ability. And this is sort of the level the mono Sapphire deck gets to. It really starts like winding up the amount of stuff that goes into it. And that should be game, I think. Yeah, that was a mistake doing that. What I should have done was just cast Solitary Exile. And if it resolves... I could do it either way. I could actually just throw Eternal Guardian out there. Could have just thrown Eternal Guardian out there, and if it got Counter Magic, c'est la vie, I've got Solitary Exile for whatever he makes. I'm not too sure I like my line of holding there. But I suppose this turn it basically means that if he doesn't have... The Inquisitor basically is going to end up winning me this game just because it keeps coming back and coming back and coming back. Alright, my line at this point should not be Exile first, it should be Eternal Guardian first, because if that card in hand is Counter Magic, it means that I win. But anyway, that is it. So I hope that you've enjoyed this little look at this part of the Hex metagame, guys. And I think that that's an interesting matchup. It goes fairly deep, and it can be a very difficult matchup both ways. I think a lot of it depends on player skill and, you know, knowing what to target in your opponent's deck. But overall, interesting matchup, and hoping to see a few more interesting matchups like that in the future. If you've liked the video, let us know in the comments. And this is Boomer for Caravel Gaming, and I'll see you next time.